by simply quoting recent interviews with two industry spokesmen who reportedly said that it was possible to make a call, or at least get a signal, at 35,000 feet. They cite no written evidence from 2001 to support this claim. And even though Popular Mechanics would have had the financial resources to carry out extensive experiments to try to disprove Dewdney's conclusions, they did not. Or at least if they did, they did not report the results. This kind of unempirical approach characterizes their whole book, in spite of its subtitle, Why Conspiracy Theories Can't Stand Up to the Facts. Here's another interesting fact about the alleged cell phone calls. In the spring of 2006, at the same time moviegoers were watching United 93, the FBI, during the trial of Zacarias Moussaoui, reduced the claim about cell phone calls from this flight down to 2. These being 2 calls allegedly made close to the ground. So while Popular Mechanics was defending the government's claim that all the alleged cell phone calls from Flight 93 went through, the government was quietly withdrawing this claim. What about the well-known alleged phone call, the one from Barbara Olson on American Flight 77 to her husband Ted Olson, who was the U.S. Solicitor General, a key figure in the Bush-Cheney administration? His testimony about this call has from the first contained inconsistencies, one of which involved the kind of phone she used. He first said it was an airplane phone, then in his next interview that it was a cell phone. He later reverted to his original answer, saying that, calling collect, she used the phone in the passenger seat. By settling on this answer, his claim was no longer threatened by the evidence that a cell phone call would have been impossible. But was even a call from a seatback phone possible from Flight 77? In my book, I said that it was not, because Flight 77 had no onboard phones. This was based on email messages from American Airlines in 2004 saying that the Boeing 757s made for American Airlines, unlike those made for United, had no onboard phones. Even if American 757s did have onboard phones, this fact would do little to overcome the implausibility of Ted Olson's report about her calls. One problem is that she was the only person who allegedly used an onboard phone to make a call from that flight. And yet, she reportedly said that all the passengers were herded to the back of the plane. Are we to believe that they watched Barbara Olson make 2 calls from an onboard phone, and none of the other 60-some people said, oh, golly, maybe I'll grab an onboard phone and make a call to my own loved ones? Furthermore, she reportedly said that the hijackers were armed, but all she mentioned were knives and box cutters. And these hijackers were very small men, from 5 foot to 5'7" at the most. There would have been only 3 or 4 of them in the cabin. At least one, Hani Hanjour, had to be flying the plane. And here we have 60-some passengers and crew, and she specifically said both pilots. One of those pilots was Charles Chick Burlingame. Are we supposed to believe that these 60-some people, led by Burlingame, could not have easily overpowered these 3 or 4 small men with knives and box cutters? The whole story is just absurd. Still another problem has been pointed out by British Columbia's Roland Morgan. He said, he has written, Ted Olson could shut up his critics by simply producing the Department of Justice's telephone accounts, showing a couple of hefty reverse charges entries charged from Flight 77's airphone number at around about 9:20 a.m. on the 11th of September 2001. But such accounts have never been produced. The official story simply cannot handle the facts about cell phones or about Barbara Olson's alleged call. But how does the 9/11 Truth movement handle the fact that so many people reported receiving calls from their loved ones from these flights? Do we have to claim implausibly that all of these people were lying? No, because even though the cell phone technology was not in place at that time to make such calls, there was another kind of technology that was. I speak of the technology of voice morphing. It was sufficiently perfected in 1999 as a test demonstrated that was reported in the Washington Post. In this test, the voice of General Carl Steiner, who was quite well known, was heard to say, "Gentlemen, we have called you together to inform you that we are going to overthrow the United States government." Now, Steiner, of course, never said any such thing, but everybody in the room would have sworn that was Steiner's voice. These people who sell these things even advertise, "You can fool your spouse." They're that good. The technology is that good. So, the technology was available to fool the people who received these calls, to think they were really hearing from their loved ones. Whether Ted Olson was a victim of this trickery or simply lied about the call from his wife is something we will not know until there is a real investigation into 9/11. By the way, we don't even have to rely on this. You can just look at the content of some of these calls and see that they're faked. The most famous one, of course, is when Mark Bingham called his mother. And his mother's sister, I believe it was, answered the phone and talked to, and said, "Oh, it's your son Mark who's on the phone." So she picked up the phone and said, "Hello, Mark." And he said, "Hello, Mom, this is Mark Bingham." Another case, Tom and Dina Burnett, the other probably most famous call. He allegedly made 4 calls. In the last one, he told her, he was on Flight 93, told her, "We've decided we're going to rush the hijackers and we're going to bring the plane down over a rural area, so, you know, we will save a congested area." And then she said, "Well, you know, the kids are right here and would like to talk to you." And he said, "Oh, tell them I'll talk to them later." In any case, these are some of the things we've learned by getting empirical about 9/11. But there's much more. Another issue is why, assuming the truth of the story that the planes were hijacked, the U.S. military failed to intercept them before they could strike their targets. The official story is that it was the FAA's fault. For the first 3 years, the military claimed that although the FAA did notify it about all 4 flights, these notifications came too late. But the 9/11 Truth movement, getting empirical, showed that even if the FAA had been as slow as the military claimed, there still would have been time for the interceptions to be made. These things can happen very quickly. This empirical research supported the idea that there had been a stand-down order canceling standard procedures. However, in the summer of 2004, perhaps in response to these findings, the 9/11 Commission, in producing its report, came up with a radically new story, saying that the FAA, after notifying the military about the first flight only 9 minutes before it crashed into the North Tower, did not notify it about the other 3 flights at all until after they had already